I was folding my daughter Haley's laundry on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Nothing fancy, just her gym leggings, a few wrinkled blouses, and the same lavender-scented dryer sheets she insisted on. I just finished smoothing out a pair of jeans when she walked in, texting with one hand and sipping iced coffee with the other. She didn't even glance at me, just wrinkled her nose in that dramatic way she does when something doesn't meet her standards. She muttered under her breath, though loud enough for it to hit me like a slap. You smell like old age, Mom. For a second, I thought I misheard her. I looked up, holding one of her shirts in my hands. What did you say, sweetheart? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She waved her hand in the air. Never mind, it's just I don't know, that mothball smell or something. It's kind of senior centurish. She said it with a smirk, like it was a joke, like I was supposed to laugh too. So I did a little laugh, fake and tight, while my stomach twisted into a knot I hadn't felt in years. She disappeared into her room without another word, shutting the door behind her, probably to post a selfie or scroll through whatever trend was hot that day. Meanwhile, I stood there surrounded by piles of her clean clothes, with my heart sinking lower than I thought possible. I didn't say anything else. I didn't defend myself. But inside, something quietly cracked. She used to call me Mama Bear. She used to crawl into bed with me when she had nightmares. She used to braid my hair and giggle when I tried to braid hers in return. She used to say she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. Now I was just an old woman folding her clothes, a walking, talking nuisance with a smell she couldn't stand. What she didn't see, what she refused to see, was what I'd given up to be here. I'd sold my little home after her divorce to move in and help. I left behind my garden, my book club, and my friends. I used my savings to help her catch up on mortgage payments when her ex stopped sending support. I took care of her kids, cooked every meal, and did every load of laundry while she rebuilt her life. But somehow, in her eyes, I turned into clutter, a worn-out sweater that no longer fits. It's strange how you can live in the same house as someone you love and still feel like you're haunting it. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo on my dresser. Haley at 5 years old, wearing fairy wings, grinning with baby teeth. My baby girl. I used to carry her on my hip, kiss her scraped knees, and sing her to sleep with lullabies. Now I was the background noise in her life. And the worst part? I let it happen. I excused every eye roll, every sarcastic jab, every moment she looked through me like I wasn't even there. I told myself she was tired, stressed, overworked, that it would pass. But it hadn't passed. It had only grown worse. And that one sentence, "You smell like old age," felt like the final nail in a coffin I didn't realize was being built for me. I sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of it settle. Not just her words, but everything that had come before them. The sacrifices, the silence, the way I'd slowly made myself smaller to fit into her life. That's when the whisper in my heart started, a quiet voice that said, "This isn't what you were made for." I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I wasn't the type to make rash decisions, but I did know one thing for sure. Something had to change. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't me who smelled like old age. Maybe it was my life, this stagnant, thankless cycle that had gone stale. But I wasn't done yet. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I close my eyes and remember the way Haley used to be before life hardened her edges, before I became invisible to her. She was such a tender-hearted child. I remember how she'd crawl into my lap after a long day, nestling her little head against my chest and asking if we could watch The Little Mermaid again for the 100th time. I remember brushing her soft brown hair while she told me stories about her day at school, her voice full of excitement over the smallest things. And I remember the tears, like the time her middle school crush broke her heart with a scribbled note that said, "You're not pretty enough." She ran straight into my arms, sobbing, and I held her through it, whispering, "You are more than enough, baby. You're everything." Back then, she looked at me like I was her whole world. Now she barely looks at me at all, unless the kids need picked up or the mortgage is due. It hurts more than I can explain. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in over time. After her divorce, I moved in to help. I didn't hesitate. She was shattered, alone with two young children and bills piling up like an avalanche. I offered my home, but she didn't want to leave her neighborhood, so I sold mine, packed my things, and came to her instead. I told myself it was temporary. That was almost 3 years ago. Since then, I've taken over most of the responsibilities without complaint. I cook the meals, do the laundry, help with homework, pick up after the kids, and quietly cover what she can't afford: car repairs, school supplies, the rising utility bills. She never asked me to, not directly, but she always sighed in that way that made me feel guilty if I didn't step in. And I did every time. She says, "Thank you," sometimes in that distracted way people do, when they aren't really looking at you. But mostly, she just moves through me like I'm furniture. I remember last Christmas, I made a special roast, decorated the house, bought presents for the kids using my savings. I even made Haley a photo album of our old memories, pictures of us baking, carving pumpkins, dancing in the living room when she was little. She barely flipped through it, said it was cute, then went back to scrolling on her phone. The only real gift she gave me was a lavender-scented candle, which I later found regifted in the guest bathroom. It's not the things that hurt, it's the absence of warmth, the way she keeps me at arm's length, as if growing up meant she had to erase the parts of herself that needed me. Sometimes I wonder, what did I do wrong? Did I make her too comfortable? Did I make her believe love always comes without limits? There are moments, fleeting ones, when I see glimpses of the girl I raised, like when she kisses her daughter's scraped knee or sings softly while washing dishes. But those moments are rare, and they vanish too quickly, like shadows in the light. I never imagined I'd live in my daughter's home and feel like a guest. Correction, not even a guest, more like the live-in help. She's told her friends that I insisted on moving in, that I can't live alone. Once I overheard her tell someone, it's just easier to let her handle the kids and chores. She needs something to do, like I'm a hobby. I'm not naive. I know life changes. I know children grow up and build lives of their own. That's how it's supposed to be. But I never expected to become someone she merely tolerates. I wanted to be a partner in her healing, a safety net while she found her footing again. I didn't come here to be repaid with distance and sarcasm, and I certainly didn't come here to be treated like something that smells like old age. But that's exactly how I feel. Old, worn out, and used. Still, I stay quiet. Still, I smile when the kids come running to me after school. Still, I pack lunches and pay bills and kiss their foreheads goodnight because despite everything, I love them more than my pride. But a voice inside me is growing louder, a small, firm voice that says, "This isn't love. This is survival." And I don't want to spend the rest of my life merely surviving in someone else's shadow. It's a strange thing to live in a house, breathe its air, clean its floors, cook in its kitchen, and still feel like a stranger inside it. That's what I became in Haley's home, or should I say my home, since I was the one who paid off most of the mortgage. But you would know that by looking at the place now. She had redecorated everything within a few months of my moving in, painted the walls gray and white, swapped out my cozy quilts for sleek, cold throw pillows, tossed my framed photos in a box marked storage, and shoved it in the attic. "My friends think the vintage stuff makes the place look cluttered," she'd said casually, as if vintage stuff didn't include memories of my entire adult life. I told myself it was her way of reclaiming space after the divorce. She needed control, stability, something she could call her own. So I stepped back as I always did, bit my tongue, and made space. Then came the dinner parties. She started hosting her work friends, people who smelled like expensive perfume and talked too loudly about spa packages and crypto. Every time she'd ask me to keep the kids busy or maybe watch a movie in your room, "Mom, just for a couple of hours," I didn't mind at first. I wanted her to have joy again, to laugh. But then I overheard her once in the kitchen pouring wine for a guest. "Oh, she's just staying with us temporarily, helping with the kids while I get back on my feet." Just staying temporarily. I stood there frozen in the hallway, holding a basket of folded towels. My throat tightened. She said it like I was some distant relative who had overstayed her welcome, as if I hadn't sacrificed my own home, my freedom, and my routine to be here for her. But I said nothing. I went back to my room that night and stared at the blank walls. It used to have my paintings and bookshelves. Now it was just a bed and a lamp. My name wasn't on anything anymore. I'd become a ghost in a home I helped build. The final sting came one afternoon when I picked up her son, Tyler, from soccer practice. He was fidgety in the back seat, cranky about a missed goal. When we got home, I told him gently to put his shoes in the basket. He threw them on the floor and yelled, "You're not the boss, you're just the maid." Just the maid. The words hit harder than I expected. I stood there for a moment, staring at him. He was only 8, he didn't mean it. He'd heard it from someone. Later, I asked Haley about it. She laughed and said, "Oh, kids repeat everything. Don't take it so personally, Mom. He knows you help out a lot." Help out? That's what my entire existence had been reduced to. Help. Never mind the nights I stayed up with her daughter through ear infections, or the times I shuffled money quietly into her purse when the bills got too high. Never mind that I cooked, cleaned, and loved her children like they were my own. She couldn't even say the word appreciate. There's a loneliness that creeps in when you feel unseen in your own home. It's not loud. It's quiet. It's in the way no one asks how your day was, in the way your stories trail off without a response, in the way people talk about you instead of to you. I swallowed it all for the sake of family, because isn't that what mothers do? We bend so others don't break. We shrink so our children can stand taller. We accept crumbs and call it love. But the truth is, I was fading, piece by piece, memory by memory, until one day I'd wake up and not recognize myself at all. And worse, neither would they. It's a strange thing to live in a house, breathe its air, clean its floors, cook in its kitchen, and still feel like a stranger inside it. That's what I became in Haley's home, or should I say my home, since I was the one who paid off most of the mortgage. But you wouldn't know that by looking at the place now. She had redecorated everything within a few months of my moving in, painted the walls gray and white, swapped out my cozy quilts for sleek, cold throw pillows, tossed my framed photos in a box marked storage, and shoved it in the attic. "My friends think the vintage stuff makes the place look cluttered," she'd said casually, as if vintage stuff didn't include memories of my entire adult life. I told myself it was her way of reclaiming space after the divorce. She needed control, stability, something she could call her own. So I stepped back, as I always did, bit my tongue, and made space. Then came the dinner parties. She started hosting her work friends, people who smelled like expensive perfume and talked too loudly about spa packages and crypto. Every time she'd ask me to keep the kids busy or maybe watch a movie in my room, just for a couple of hours, I didn't mind at first. I wanted her to have joy again, to laugh. But then I overheard her once in the kitchen pouring wine for a guest. "Oh, she's just staying with us temporarily, helping with the kids while I get back on my feet." Just staying temporarily. I stood there frozen in the hallway, holding a basket of folded towels. My throat tightened. She said it like I was some distant relative who had overstayed her welcome, as if I hadn't sacrificed my own home, my freedom, and my routine to be here for her. But I said nothing. I went back to my room that night and stared at the blank walls. It used to have my paintings and bookshelves. Now it was just a bed and a lamp. My name wasn't on anything anymore. I'd become a ghost in a home I helped build. The final sting came one afternoon when I picked up her son Tyler from soccer practice. He was fidgety in the back seat, cranky about a missed goal. When we got home, I told him gently to put his shoes in the basket. He threw them on the floor and yelled, "You're not the boss, you're just the maid." Just the maid. The words hit harder than I expected. I stood there for a moment, staring at him. He was only 8, he didn't mean it. He'd heard it from someone. Later, I asked Haley about it. She laughed and said, "Oh, kids repeat everything. Don't take it so personally, Mom. He knows you help out a lot." Help out? What? My entire existence had been reduced to help. Never mind the nights I stayed up with her daughter through ear infections, or the times I shuffled money quietly into her purse when the bills got too high. Never mind that I cooked, cleaned, and loved her children like they were my own. She couldn't even say the word appreciate. There's a loneliness that creeps in when you feel unseen in your own home. It's not loud. It's quiet. It's in the way no one asks how your day was, in the way your stories trail off without a response, in the way people talk about you instead of to you. I swallowed it all for the sake of family, because isn't that what mothers do? We bend so others don't break. We shrink so our children can stand taller. We accept crumbs and call it love. But the truth is, I was fading piece by piece, memory by memory, until one day I'd wake up and not recognize myself at all. And worse, neither would they. She thought I was broke. That's what stung the most. How little she knew me anymore. In her eyes, I was just an aging woman with no income, no independence, and no options. Just someone who needed her roof to survive. But what she didn't realize, what no one in that house realized, was that I'd been quietly building something for years. After I retired from my school librarian job, I had a modest pension, nothing flashy but stable. And while most people thought I spent my days knitting for fun or volunteering at the church to pass the time, I'd actually been running a small part-time business out of my old home. It started with crocheted baby blankets and embroidered keepsakes I made for friends. Then someone suggested Etsy. Before I knew it, I was shipping handmade memory quilts, personalized bookmarks, and anniversary pillows across the country. It wasn't a fortune, but I didn't spend much, and every spare dollar went straight into a quiet little savings account no one knew about. Even when I moved in with Haley, I didn't stop. After the kids went to bed, I'd pull out my fabric scraps and sewing machine from the closet and work into the night. She thought I was just keeping busy. She never asked what I was making or where it was going, and that was fine by me because I wasn't just stitching thread, I was stitching escape. I wasn't sure what for at first. Maybe a little place of my own someday, maybe a long overdue vacation, maybe just the security of knowing that I wasn't completely tethered to her whims. Every month, I watched the balance grow slowly, steadily. It gave me something no one else in that house gave me: control. When Haley would complain about the bills, I'd quietly cover what I could with my pension. I let her believe she was the only one holding everything together. I let her think I needed her. But the truth? She needed me far more than I needed her. I didn't say that, of course. Mothers don't throw facts like daggers. We just tuck them into our pockets and carry on. Still, as I sat on the edge of my bed one evening, balancing my checkbook while the sounds of laughter floated from her upstairs girls' night, I started to feel something unfamiliar. Power. Not the loud, flashy kind. Not the kind that slams doors or yells. This was quiet power, the kind that sits in silence, sipping tea, knowing it can leave at any moment and be just fine. I looked around at the room I slept in. White walls, plain curtains, the nightstand lamp flickered slightly, the bulb needing replacing. There was nothing here that reflected who I was, no signs of me. I was a ghost in this home, but I wasn't helpless. I had a bank account with enough to start over. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know where. But I knew that money represented something sacred: choice. And I hadn't felt like I had any choices in years. For the first time in a long while, I started thinking not about what the kids needed or what Haley expected, but about what I wanted. A cottage in the countryside, a long trip across the ocean, a quiet apartment where I could finally hang my own art again. I didn't have the answers yet, but I finally had the means to ask the question: what if this wasn't the final chapter? What if there was more? And what if I stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission to live it? That night, I opened a new tab on my laptop and typed in solo travel over 60. I didn't book anything yet, but the search results were enough to make me feel alive again. Stories of women like me, widowed, divorced, retired, forgotten, who had packed their bags and flown to Italy, Greece, even Bali. Women who found themselves after everyone else stopped looking. For the first time, I dared to picture myself among them. She thought I was broke. She thought I had nowhere to go. She thought wrong. Because while she was laughing in her kitchen with her wine glass raised, I was quietly reclaiming my life, one handmade stitch and one hidden dollar at a time. I still believed there was a way back, a way to reach her, to remind her of the bond we once had before the distance, before the bitterness, before she started seeing me as just a shadow in the hallway. So I decided to try one last time. I invited Haley to lunch, just the two of us, no kids, no errands, no distractions. I told her I'd make her favorite meal, creamy chicken Alfredo, garlic knots from scratch, and that spinach salad she used to love in high school. She texted back a casual sure, without much thought, but I held on to hope. Maybe, just maybe, if I opened my heart, she'd open hers. I set the table with care. My old china plates that she once called Grandma, but I knew deep down reminded her of our Sunday dinners when she was little. I even placed a small vase with daisies, her favorite flowers when she was a teenager. The food was hot, the table perfect, and I waited. She was 45 minutes late. When she finally walked through the door, she didn't apologize. She barely looked up from her phone. "Sorry, work call ran long," she said flatly, scrolling as she dropped her purse on a chair and slid into her seat. "What are we doing?" I forced a smile. "Just wanted to have some time with you, no distractions, just mother and daughter." She glanced at the plate in front of her. "You made this? Wow, haven't had this in forever." For a moment, I let myself feel encouraged. Maybe she'd remember something. Maybe she'd soften. But as we ate, I tried to start a real conversation. I gently brought up how I'd been feeling lately. Not to accuse, just to be honest. I told her I sometimes felt like a guest in the house, like I didn't belong anymore. I told her it hurt when she made comments, even in passing, that chipped away at my dignity. She sighed and put her fork down, clearly annoyed. "Mom, come on, you're too sensitive," she said, glancing back at her phone. "Seriously, it's not that deep. Everyone jokes around. You're just reading into it." "I don't think calling someone old and smelly is a joke," I said softly. She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, are we seriously still on about that?" Tessa was joking. I was joking. "Can we not have a therapy session over lunch?" I looked down at my plate. She wasn't hearing me. Worse, she wasn't even trying. I nodded slowly, my appetite gone. I excused myself for a moment and stood in the kitchen, letting the silence wrap around me. And that's when the clarity hit. I had spent years trying to make her comfortable, years giving her grace, understanding, support, sometimes when I had none left to give. And here she was, brushing off my pain like it was a tantrum, like I was the problem. It wasn't about the food or the words or the rolled eyes. It was about the fact that she no longer saw me as someone worth listening to, as someone worth feeling for. She finished quickly, stood up, and kissed me on the cheek like everything was fine. "Thanks for lunch."
Got to run.
"Zach's got a dentist appointment. I'll text you later, okay?" I nodded. She didn't see it, but something in me clicked into place as she walked out the door. Not bitterness, not revenge, just decision. That night, after the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, I sat in my room and pulled out the little notebook where I tracked my savings. I flipped through the pages, the numbers underlined, neat and deliberate, every deposit, every craft sale, every small step towards something bigger. I knew what I had to do now. There would be no more pleading, no more reaching out, hoping to be seen. Haley had shown me exactly where I stood in her life, and now it was my turn to choose where she stood in mine. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing something no one else does, especially when it's something they took for granted. Like who actually owns the house they're living in. After Haley's divorce, she was so overwhelmed with legal papers, custody schedules, and emotional debris that she never stopped to ask the important questions. She just assumed that everything, the house, the bills, the responsibility, had defaulted to her. She cried to me one night, shoulders shaking, about how she'd have to sell it, that she couldn't raise 2 kids in a cramped apartment again, that she couldn't lose the only stability they had. And like I always did, I stepped in. I sold my little 2-bedroom place, the one with my rose garden and sunroom, the one where I finally felt peace after my own husband passed. I cashed in a small CD I'd been sitting on for years and offered to help. But what she didn't pay attention to, and what I never felt the need to remind her of, was that the mortgage had been transferred to my name. We did it for better interest rates. She said she couldn't qualify for a loan. It made sense back then for her for the kids. But I held on to the paperwork filed neatly in my fireproof box at the back of my closet, next to my birth certificate and will. Haley never asked about it again. She thought the house belonged to her, just like she thought I belonged to her too, to be used, thanked occasionally, but mostly just expected to help out. In her mind, I was just lucky to live under her roof. She never realized the opposite was true. Quietly, I made the payments. When she handed me her portion, which was less and less over time, I didn't say a word. I made up the difference without complaint, even as she used her extra money on yoga retreats, massages, and date nights with men who never lasted more than a season. I never asked where the money was going. I just made sure the kids had what they needed, and the house stayed in good standing. Every time she rolled her eyes at me, every time she made a snide remark about my old lady TV shows or my churchy sweaters, I swallowed it down. But I never forgot what was in that fireproof box, and now that quiet little truth felt more like a key than a secret. After our awkward lunch, after she dismissed my pain like a paper cut, I went to my closet and pulled out the file deed in my name, titled under my signature. Even the last refinance had gone through under my credentials. She had no idea. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the papers, my fingers tracing the embossed notary stamps. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. I wasn't plotting revenge. This wasn't about spite, it was about reclaiming what was mine, who I was. She had stripped me of my dignity inch by inch, made me feel small, replaceable. But this was the line in the sand. I had been generous, but I wasn't going to be invisible and homeless when she eventually decided I'd worn out my welcome. Something told me that day wasn't far off. I remembered a conversation I overheard recently, her whispering to someone on the phone, "She's getting harder to deal with, always in the way. Eventually, I'll need to figure something out." Eventually. She was planning her freedom, so I started planning mine. The next morning, while she was out with her accountability brunch girls, I copied the documents. I took pictures of the mail addressed to me from the mortgage company. I reviewed the payment history, all of it in my name. Then I started researching my options. She may have forgotten who paid for her stability, but I hadn't, and soon she'd remember. Not through yelling, not through slam doors or angry speeches. No, when you've been treated like a ghost for long enough, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is vanish. It started with a search: solo trips for women over 60. I scrolled past ads for cruises and family resorts until I found it. A photo of a woman with silver hair standing barefoot on a balcony in Tuscany, holding a glass of wine and smiling like she just remembered who she was. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just going to dream about it. I was going to go. It had always been on my list. Italy, the winding streets of Florence, the gondolas in Venice, the art, the food, the language I never learned but always loved the sound of. I used to tell Haley when she was a teenager, "One day when you're grown, maybe we'll go together." She'd nod distractedly and go back to texting. I stopped saying it after a while, but now, with the savings I'd quietly built, the deed in my name, and nothing left to prove to anyone, I opened my laptop and clicked confirm on a one-way first-class ticket to Rome. I chose first class because, for once, I wanted to feel like I mattered, like I deserved the good seat. And I did. Next, I visited my lawyer's office, a woman I'd trusted since my will was first drafted years ago. We transferred the utilities and remaining mortgage obligations to Haley's name. Since the home was fully paid off but held under my ownership, I had every legal right to assign responsibility. I left instructions for the title transfer process to begin immediately. She would inherit the house, but she'd also inherit the upkeep. It was no longer mine to carry. Then came the quiet part. I waited until everyone was out. Haley was at work, the kids were at school. The silence in the house felt different that day. Not lonely, peaceful, free. I packed lightly, just 2 suitcases. One with clothes and essentials, the other with my sewing kit and favorite fabric swatches. I wasn't sure why I brought them. Maybe because I'd built something with those hands, something real, and I wanted to carry it with me. I didn't touch her things. I didn't touch the kids' rooms. I folded their laundry one last time and left it neatly stacked on the couch. Then I wrote the note, just one line, scribbled in my neat cursive on the back of a grocery list. "Enjoy the house. I'm off to enjoy my life." I stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pineapple. Haley bought it on a trip to Hawaii with her ex. She probably hadn't looked at it in years. As I stepped out the door, keys in my hand, I turned around for one last glance. Not a tear fell. I thought I'd feel sadness or guilt or some motherly instinct to turn around and clean up one more mess, but instead, I felt light, like I was walking toward the woman I used to be. At the airport, I ordered a coffee and watched people rush by. I'd forgotten what it felt like to sit somewhere and not be waiting on someone else, not checking the time for pickups or thinking about dinner. When they called for first-class boarding, I walked up with my head high. The steward smiled and took my ticket. "Have a wonderful journey," he said. I smiled back. "Oh, I plan to." As the plane lifted into the sky, I looked out the window, watching the city below grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared into clouds. It wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. I was no longer the woman folding laundry while someone laughed at her. I was no longer the temporary guest or the maid or the one who smelled like old age. I was a woman who had sacrificed, endured, and quietly built her freedom stitch by stitch, dollar by dollar, and now I was claiming it. Haley would come home and find the note. She'd panic, probably call every neighbor, check the cameras, scroll through her texts wondering if she missed something. And then she'd realize I hadn't asked for her permission. I hadn't warned her because I didn't need to. I had spent years asking for less than I deserved. Now I was done asking. The gate was quiet when I sat down with my cappuccino, waiting to board. Around me, travelers bustled with neck pillows and luggage tags, announcements echoing softly overhead. I was calm, calmer than I had been in years. Then my phone buzzed once, twice, 10 times. I glanced at the screen. All from Haley. No surprise there. I just watched as the missed call count ticked up like some frantic scoreboard. 12, 13, 15. Then came the text. "Where are you, Mom? This isn't funny. Did you seriously leave? You can't just dump everything on me." There it was. It wasn't worry for me. It was panic for her. She'd probably walked in and found the house silent, no dinner simmering, no kids' backpacks by the door, just that one note on the fridge and laundry folded neatly on the couch. For the first time, she had to look around and realize that the woman she treated like wallpaper had vanished, that the woman who kept the house together had finally let go. And then came the real question. What about the kids? She texted. I stared at it for a moment, then slowly typed back. They have a mother and now a lesson. I turned my phone to silent. She hadn't been asking where I was because she was scared for me. She was scared for herself, scared of the responsibilities now sitting squarely on her shoulders, the ones I had carried silently without thanks for so long. She had mistaken my presence for permanence. She had mistaken my love for servitude. But she'd just learned what happens when someone stops tolerating being treated like an afterthought. She'd raised her voice when she had none left to raise against her ex-husband. She rolled her eyes at me because it was easier than facing her own bitterness. She treated me like help because she believed I had nowhere else to go. Now she knew better. When they called for boarding, I stood, tucked my phone away, and walked toward the gate, lighter than I had felt in years. She could call all she wanted. She'd have to live with the echo of my absence now. The first few days in Italy felt like stepping into someone else's life. Everything was slower, softer, kinder. The air smelled different, like warm bread and old stone, like olive groves and lavender carried on a breeze that didn't rush, just strolled. I checked into a little hotel in Florence. Nothing extravagant, but it had a balcony that caught the morning sun and overlooked a narrow cobblestone street where scooters zipped by and the locals hung out laundry like clockwork. Every morning, I'd open the doors wide, let the air in, and just stand there, barefoot, wrapped in the hotel's cotton robe, breathing in the quiet. No demands, no appointments, no one asking where the cereal was or if I'd picked up the dry cleaning. Just me. The first night, I walked to a small trattoria with candles on every table and an older man playing accordion music near the entrance. The waitress spoke in soft, slow English when she heard my accent, but I tried my best in broken Italian. Vorrei rosso, per favor. She smiled like I just passed a test. I sat alone, sipping deep red wine, twirling pasta on a silver fork and listening to the laughter of strangers. Not once did I feel alone. Not once did anyone look at me like I didn't belong. It was the strangest, most beautiful thing. I felt seen, not as a grandmother or a housemaid or someone to be tiptoed around, just a woman. One afternoon, I joined a walking tour of the Uffizi Gallery. Our guide was a woman in her 70s with silver curls and red lipstick who carried herself like a queen. She talked about art like it was oxygen, how every brushstroke had a story, how beauty wasn't about age or perfection but expression and presence. I hung on every word. After the tour, we shared a gelato and sat by the river talking about our lives. She told me she divorced in her 50s and had never looked back. "Freedom tastes better than marriage," she said with a wink. I laughed harder than I had in years. I'd forgotten how good it felt to laugh, to speak without measuring every word, to be curious again instead of constantly tired. At night, I lay in the crisp hotel sheets, my body still adjusting to the time difference, but my soul adjusting to something far more important: peace. There were no doors being slammed, no whispered complaints about my cooking, no one suggesting I go to my room like a tenant in someone else's life. There was just stillness, and in that stillness, I found something I hadn't felt in decades: joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. I visited a leather market the next morning and bought myself a handbag, a real one, hand-stitched, deep brown with soft brass accents. The shopkeeper called me Bella Signora, and I laughed because I couldn't remember the last time someone said I was beautiful and meant it, not as a joke, not with pity, but with genuine warmth. Each day, I rediscovered pieces of myself I thought had withered long ago. The version of me who danced in the kitchen when no one was watching, the version of me who read poetry aloud and cried at the endings, the version of me who dreamed wildly, vividly, without shame. Haley had made me feel like I was fading, but here under the Tuscan sun, I was starting to shine again. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't someone who smelled like old age. I was a woman, a mother. Yes, a grandmother, absolutely, but more than that, I was a soul worthy of love, rest, and discovery. And I had finally given myself permission to be that woman. In the quiet mornings before the city stirred, I started journaling. Just a notebook from a corner shop. Plain, soft-covered, but it became a sanctuary. A place where the words flowed freely without judgment, without eye rolls or interruption. At first, I wrote about the sights. The bell tower I could see from my balcony, the scent of espresso from the cafe below. But slowly, the words changed, turned inward, became pieces of a truth I had never said out loud, not even to myself. I started writing about Haley, about the way her laughter used to light up a room, the way she held my hand during thunderstorms as a child, the way she once made me a world's best mom card out of glitter and construction paper, and how somewhere along the way that little girl grew up into a woman who couldn't look me in the eye. I wrote about the quiet hurt, the birthdays she forgot, the holidays where I was just expected to cook, clean, and disappear. Once the dishes were done, the times I cried behind closed doors, brushing it off as hormones or headaches, so I wouldn't seem weak. I wrote about how I gave and gave and gave without asking for anything in return, without boundaries, without pause, because that's what we're taught, isn't it? That good mother's sacrifice, that we give until there's nothing left, and then we give a little more. And maybe that's where I went wrong. I gave so much that I taught her to take. I carried the weight of her home, her heartbreaks, her children, her chaos, and I never once asked her to carry me. And now, as I imagined her at home scrambling with the mortgage notice, folding laundry, yelling at the kids to brush their teeth, I wondered, was it cruel of me to leave? Or was it necessary for her, for me? Maybe both. Because maybe she needed to learn how heavy the weight was. Maybe she needed to feel the pressure of a full house with no one quietly absorbing the stress in the background, no one magically making lunches, fixing loose buttons, remembering dentist appointments. Maybe she needed to see what I had shielded her from for years. I didn't leave to punish her. I left to stop punishing myself. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, not out of bitterness, but out of survival, out of long overdue love for the woman I'd neglected in the mirror. And perhaps that love would teach her something too. Because sometimes the greatest lesson we give our children isn't in the sacrifices we make, but in the limits we finally draw. 2 weeks passed like a dream. I wandered through open-air markets, took afternoon naps, and journaled on park benches beneath olive trees. I felt my mind clear in ways I hadn't realized it was cluttered. The heaviness I carried back home had started to lift. Then one morning, I woke to a soft ping from my phone, a message from Haley. I stared at it for a few seconds, unsure of what to expect. Another guilt trip, another angry plea about the bills I'd left her to deal with. But when I opened it, I felt the breath catch in my throat.
Mum, I'm sorry.
I didn't realize how much you were doing. I read the words again. Not defensive, not sarcastic, just honest. The house is overwhelming. I haven't had time to cook real meals. The laundry is piled up, and the kids keep asking where you are. I tried to handle it all, but I see it now. What you were carrying, what I took for granted. The kids miss you. I miss you. Please come home. My eyes blurred with tears, not because I was eager to run back, but because for the first time in years, she saw me, really saw me. She finally understood what I'd been silently doing all those years, the invisible threads I'd woven through her daily life, holding things together without fanfare, without expectation. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone resting in my lap, my chest full of a dozen emotions all pressing against each other. Part of me wanted to cry for all the years I'd spent feeling like a ghost. Part of me wanted to board a plane just to hug the children, bury my face in their little curls, and make them pancakes in the morning like I used to. But I didn't reach for my suitcase. I didn't search for return flights. Because I had learned something in those 2 weeks that changed everything. I mattered. Even when I wasn't needed, even when I wasn't useful, even when no one depended on me. For decades, my value had been tied to what I did for others, how well I served, how quietly I sacrificed. But now, for the first time, I was learning who I was without all of that, and it felt beautiful. I typed a reply, then paused. I didn't want to be cruel. I wasn't trying to punish her. But I also didn't want to fall back into the same cycle. Her pleading, me returning, everything going back to normal until the next time she forgot what I was worth. So I wrote carefully, "Thank you for your message. It means more than you know." I needed to hear those words, Haley. I truly did. I love you. I miss you too. But right now, I need this time for myself, not to hurt you, but to heal me. Let's talk soon, but not about me coming back. Let's talk about what comes next for both of us. I hit send and exhaled. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Let her sit with those feelings for a while. Let her grow in the discomfort of understanding. Let her learn that love doesn't always mean proximity. Sometimes it means space. Sometimes it means truth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let someone learn how to stand on their own. I stared at her message again before responding, my fingers hovering over the keys, heart steady but heavy. Please come home. Once, I would have packed the moment I read those words. I would have folded up my own needs like laundry, stuffed my dreams in a suitcase, and returned because I thought that's what good mothers did. I thought love meant always saying yes. But not anymore. This time, I was saying yes to myself. So I messaged her back, not out of anger, not with judgment, but with truth, with love. I love you, Haley. That hasn't changed, it never will. But I won't be coming back to fix everything again. You need to learn what I had to do. You need to feel what I carried, so you'll stop asking others to do it for you without even noticing. I'm living now, and I deserve this life just as much as you deserved all the chances I gave you. I'll visit when I'm ready, but I won't be your crutch again. I read it once, twice, then hit send. I expected another rush of messages, maybe a call, a protest. But there was nothing, just silence. Not angry silence, not dramatic silence, just stunned stillness. And in that space, I felt the echo of something powerful. She heard me. Maybe for the first time in her life, she really heard me. I walked outside with my journal, sat on the same bench I'd come to every afternoon, and let the sun warm my face. I thought about all the years I spent living in the background, my needs shelved, my identity whittled down to usefulness. I had mothered until there was nothing left of the woman I used to be. And now it was my turn. Not out of selfishness, but out of balance, because I had learned something every woman should know. Love without boundaries is not noble, it's erosion. And I was done eroding. I wasn't punishing Haley. I was releasing her from the illusion that I would always be there to catch her, no matter how she treated me. I was inviting her to grow, to rise, to finally become the woman and mother I knew she could be. But I wouldn't do it for her anymore. She had to walk this part herself. And I had walking of my own to do through vineyards and museums, through pages of my journal, through memories I had buried under casseroles and carpool pickups. I was uncovering a life I had postponed for far too long. And yes, there were pangs of guilt. Of course there were. The mother in me still flinched when I imagined the kids' confused little faces, still worried about whether she remembered to buy enough groceries. I still ached when I saw grandmothers holding hands with toddlers in piazzas. But the woman in me, the whole, breathing, finally awakening woman, was at peace because for once I wasn't betraying myself. I was finally choosing her. And maybe, just maybe, in doing so, I was showing Haley something far more valuable than folded socks and warm meals. I was showing her what it looks like to stop surviving and start living. 3 months later, I stood barefoot on the tile floor of my new kitchen, sunlight pouring in through open shutters, and I thought, I am finally home. Not just in a physical space, but in myself. I'd found a small villa for rent near the Amalfi Coast. It wasn't glamorous, just 2 bedrooms, faded shutters, a fig tree in the yard, but it had character, history, warm walls that didn't echo with criticism or cold silence. For the first time in decades, every inch of space around me reflected me. I painted one of the walls a soft lavender. I hung my quilts, the ones I'd stitched late at night while holding in tears, now proud and visible for guests to admire. I even placed my favorite books on open shelves, not hidden in boxes, not packed away to make room. This was my space. And slowly people came into it. Neighbors invited me to local gatherings. An American woman named Joan, divorced at 67, sharp as a whip, took me under her wing. She introduced me to her circle, a group of women mostly over 60, who had each come here for their own second chapter. Some had retired early, some had run from heartbreak. One simply said, I woke up one day and realized I wanted wine with lunch and didn't want to ask permission. We met for long meals. We danced at seaside festivals. We swapped stories without shame, without masks. I wasn't grandma. I wasn't just visiting. I wasn't anyone's burden. I was Margaret and I was enough. I joined a cooking class led by a widow named Rosa, who insisted pasta was therapy. She taught us to knead dough like it owed us something, to taste the sauce before judging it like people, she said with a wink. Taste, don't assume. I laughed so hard that day I cried. One afternoon, while sipping espresso under the lemon trees, Joan nudged me. You should write, she said. Everything you've told us, you need to put it out there. Women need to hear it. And just like that, a new door opened. I started a blog. Not done yet. Life After 60. At first, it was just a place to share my reflections about boundaries, about motherhood, about love and loss and rediscovery. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but within weeks, the messages started, from Kansas, from Australia, from Cape Town. Women wrote to say, me too. They told me about thankless marriages, adult children who used guilt as currency, decades spent putting themselves last. And they all said the same thing. I didn't know it was allowed to choose myself. So I kept writing, and each word helped heal something in me. I wasn't just living. I was reaching, helping others find the light I'd once lost. My days became full, not with obligations, but with choices. I walked along the cliffs in the early mornings. I took watercolor lessons from an old artist who never spoke a word of English, but somehow always understood me. I danced in the kitchen to Italian jazz, swirling pasta sauce with one hand and joy with the other. There were still quiet moments when I missed the kids. Of course, I missed the weight of little heads on my shoulder, the way my grandson used to say Nona like it was the most important word in the world. But I didn't miss the version of myself I had to be to stay near them. This version, the one in linen skirts and red lipstick, with flour-dusted hands and laugh lines deepening by the day, this was the real me. I wasn't done. I was just beginning. And somewhere across the ocean, I hoped Haley was too. They said I smelled like old age. That phrase used to haunt me. It clung to the corners of my mind like dust in an attic, settling quietly, then stirring when I least expected it. I'd hear it in Haley's offhanded jokes, in the laughter of her friends, in the way she sprayed air freshener when I walked by, as if I carried decay instead of dignity. But that's not who I am anymore. Now I smell like lavender from the sachets I hang in my closet, like fresh olive oil I drizzle on crusty bread every afternoon, like the salty sea air that drifts through my kitchen window when I cook, like espresso and basil and sun-dried tomatoes warming in the oven. I smell like freedom. It's funny how scent can hold so much memory, so much meaning. Once, I was surrounded by the sterile scent of obligation, by the tired aroma of overused dish soap and reheated leftovers, by the sharp tang of disappointment, my own and everyone else's. But now I carry the scent of self-worth. I walk through the world with my shoulders back and my chin up, no longer wondering if I'm in the way, no longer shrinking myself to fit into someone else's life. I don't apologize for existing. I don't tiptoe. I take up space. I fill a room, not with noise but with presence. It took me far too long to understand this simple truth. Sometimes people need to lose your help to appreciate your presence. They need to stumble under the weight you carried so effortlessly to realize it was never light to begin with. They need to sit in the silence you once filled with love, meals, and clean laundry and feel the emptiness echo. I didn't leave Haley because I stopped loving her. I left because I finally loved myself. I spent decades teaching her how to walk, how to be brave, how to hold her head high, but I never showed her how to hold mine. That was my mistake. I gave endlessly and without condition, thinking that's what love required, but all it did was teach her to expect me not to value me. The day I walked out that door, I didn't slam it, I didn't scream, I didn't demand gratitude. I simply chose peace over proximity. And in doing so, I finally heard my own voice again. Now, as I sit beneath a sun-drenched olive tree with my journal open and a glass of chilled white wine at my side, I reflect on the woman I used to be. She was kind, patient, giving, but also tired, overlooked, unseen. That woman did her best with what she had. She loved deeply, she gave everything she had, and then some, and I honor her. But I'm not her anymore. I'm not invisible.
I'm not just a grandma.
I'm not someone to be tolerated. I'm a woman who wakes up each day in a home she chose, living a life she built not from what others gave her, but from what she finally gave herself. And I will never fade again. I still talk to Haley now and then. Our messages are shorter but kinder, measured, real. She's trying. I can see it. She's learning how to carry her own life. She's begun asking about me instead of assuming. It's not perfect, but it's honest, and that's enough. When the kids ask when I'll come visit, I tell them soon because I will on my time as a guest, not as the help, as a grandmother, not as a ghost. And when I do, I'll bring gifts, not just from Italy, but from the version of me they've never met before. The version who knows her worth, the version who smiles without apology, the version who smells like sunlight and second chances. And when I walk through that door, they won't just see their mother or grandmother. They'll see a woman who left not to abandon them, but to find herself. And that scent,